and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the organizers for inviting me. It's been a very interesting workshop today, and I could actually spend 10 or 15 minutes with disclaimers. I'll try to keep it very short. So I've been very impressed with the pedagogical theory that's been talked about today, and I don't know anything about that. Everything I know is what I learned today, and this is just a very practical kind of in the trenches talk. So I apologize if I violate things that I don't even know about good practices in education. I do want to thank my co-authors, who are the other faculty in our executive committee who have helped develop this curriculum. I'm going to tell you why we did it and how we're using it, and hopefully it'll all make sense. So first I have to tell you one slide worth of the Biomedical Informatics program at Stanford. This is a program, a PhD and academic research master's program in methodological development. So this is not, first disclaimers, this is not meant for biologists to learn how to use tools. This is to train tool builders. So you don't get out of this program until you have created a novel methodology and applied it in some way that shows that it's not useless. And this is a word cloud from all of the PhD dissertations. So you can see that methodological, method is the #1 word, disease, cancer, data, clinical, genes, information, and many other things. So it's a methodology-oriented program for tool builders. It started in 1982, focused entirely on clinical informatics, electronic medical records, databases for doctors, and decision support. They hired me in 1992, so we declared that bioinformatics was also relevant. And then over the years, we've added imaging informatics, translational bioinformatics. And I think a major point here is we have resisted the very strong pressures to have different programs for bioinformatics and imaging informatics and clinical informatics, and have insisted, at least now for 35, 36 years, to house all of our informatics students together in a shared curriculum, followed by specialization during their research in the area that they want to work in for their dissertation. We recognize that that's not an obvious decision, and that many, many places have made different decisions, which is fine. But part of this curriculum comes from that very important feature, which is an integrated informatics training across all of biomedicine. And we know from our alums, there's about 211 PhD and master's graduates since 1982, and we know that whatever they did for their dissertation over the next 30 or 40 years is not always what they remain doing, and that they've always thanked us for the broad part of the curriculum that prepared them. They went into a drug company doing bioinformatics, and then they were asked to run the clinical electronic medical record system, which, and then they sent us a message saying, thank you for telling me how to spell electronic medical record, because I am now the expert at Pfizer on how to do that. There has been a trend, however, which is, I don't think you will be surprised, that, and you don't have to read all that, but students are very good at focusing on their area of research, becoming expert at it, publishing papers, and getting their PhD. But we were worried that they were losing that breadth, and that they left very good in their area, but not with the breadth that we knew from the alums was very valuable. Not leaving with a broad understanding of the informatics challenges and approaches across all of biomedicine. And so we finally decided to do something about it. So first, this is how we consider, this is not very novel. This is how we think about training. We have general biomedical informatics knowledge and skills that are not particularly deep, but are at a level that the faculty thinks is appropriate. And then there's the deep expertise of research, which has to be world-class and profoundly aware of every paper ever written on the topic that you're working in. We all know what deep expertise in research means. Now, and what we're seeing, however, is that when we, over the course of a career, if you have an appropriate set of informatics skills, you might find yourself doing several different areas, you know, in whatever time periods are relevant. And that's where the alums were telling us, thank you for giving us that breadth. And in fact, obviously, during that career, you also accumulate more general knowledge and skills, and that makes you a valuable contributor, hopefully, to somebody or some institution. But we're just focused on getting them out the door with this in good shape. We don't have many worries about this, but we were worried about the crossbar. So of course, training of research scientists is a multifaceted activity, and I'm just talking about the curriculum for the qualifying exam for the breadth. There's many other elements to the program. I'm not going to talk about them. I do want to briefly say that we assume that the students achieve what I would call technical virtuosity in the information sciences by taking classes. So they take some of our classes. There's a project class that I teach that teaches where I can make sure that every student has taken a project from A to Z, from conception to publication, and I personally observe this as director of the program so that when they do the PhD, it's the same thing, just bigger and harder. Then there's computer science, statistics, and math curriculum with a fair amount of units to gain that technical virtuosity, social and ethical issues related to this work, biology, medicine, and more computer science and statistics for the PhD students. Above the bottom line is for the master's and the PhD students. So that's just classwork. So we decided for the 2016 entering class that we needed to redo the qualifying exam. So this is a typical exam that occurs at the end of the second year and advances you to PhD candidacy. And if it doesn't work out, maybe you get a master's degree and an encouragement to do something else. We decided to move to two-part exam. The first is the crossbar part, is a written comprehensive exam covering 6 areas, which I'm going to talk about. And then an R01 style research proposal with specific aims that is the first step in that deeper part, and I'm not going to discuss about that any further. So here are the 6 areas, and I want to make another disclaimer here. I do not propose that this is for the whole world. If it's useful to the world, that would be great, but this met our local needs and reflected our local faculty interests and priorities. So it's in 6 areas: modeling biomedical systems, medical data informatics, bioinformatics, the use of informatics in biology. I think that's what most of us here are most comfortable with. Translational bioinformatics, you'll see what we mean by that. Imaging informatics, and very basic informatics skills. And then we assigned faculty to take the lead, actually groups of faculty and students, to take the lead on these and create a document which had a section called What Everybody Should Know, which is kind of free form and mostly supposed to get you fired up to read the next section, which is the specific content we would like you to be aware of, and then a long list of sources. Obviously, in the qualifying exam, we're interested not just in their ability to understand that content, but to integrate it to solve novel problems, and I'll show you how we try to do that in the qualifying exam. So let me just go to bioinformatics, which I think is the area where you all would have the most expertise and knowledge. So what everyone should know is something like this. What are the key terminologies for bioinformatics? How does pairwise sequence alignment work? We think of that as a very fundamental algorithm that is worth knowing well. This is everybody. So let me just step back. When I say what everyone should know, that is all students in our program, even those who are doing deep learning on chest x-rays, okay? And even those who are doing data mining in the electronic medical record. So that's the tension. You can't just tell them that you need to know all of bioinformatics. There are some students who will because of their depth, but this is what we want all of them to know. How can we use hidden Markov models for multiple sequence alignment? What is the role of pathways and networks in biology? How do you compute a phylogenetic tree? What are the key opportunities and challenges for text processing? And what is the challenges for 3D structure prediction? We try to make these, they're not all successful, open-ended so that it's an infinite amount of learning that could happen. So that's the what everyone should know. And then we give, in this case, it's a 4-page outline form of what we mean by the bioinformatics specific content. So I can't give you those 4 pages. You don't want to see them right now. But for example, these are the high-level elements in the outline, which mirror the what everybody should know. And I just did a small expansion of the first one. So terminologies, and we say you need to know what the gene ontology is, HGNC, the NCBI tools, the protein data bank, KEGG, Reactome, and maybe even more. And sometimes we have sub-bullets, and this goes on for 4 pages. Because they said if you're going to give us a curriculum, we need to know what it is and we need to know what to study. So we had to be somewhat prescriptive, which is very difficult, as you might imagine, because you have to say no to some things. And then this is just an example of a fragment of the sources. So you might recognize this is just some of the things that you can do to learn this material. And really what we're counting on is that there will become a culture among the students, especially the senior students, having study groups and leading study groups with the junior students and having this become a vertical integrator. And we've seen some tiny little evidence that this might happen because they have formed study groups. Of course, the top one is the class that I teach. If you take my class, you will know everything in the curriculum and more. And then if you don't want to take my class because you don't have enough space in your program, here's a list of sources to get some of that information or all of it for that topic. So now, without going into the same amount of detail, I want to show you the other 5 areas to give you a sense of what we're expecting. And in parentheses is the name of my colleague who led this effort at Stanford. So in modeling biomedical systems, we have expectations in knowledge representation, data management, ontologies, the modeling of tasks and procedures, the modeling of uncertainty, and evaluation of biomedical systems. And then again, that turns into a few pages of expanded outline. Translational bioinformatics, which I would define as linking the biological entities to the clinical entities, has this outline, and again, I won't read through it, but it's databases connecting clinical and biological entities, specific issues related to machine learning and NLP, regulatory science issues, patient privacy and informatics issues, and then some technical stuff that we think is very important, and then an introduction, at least, to digital technologies and mobile health. You can already see how this will have to evolve over time. Then we have medical data informatics. Nigam Shah led that. How does healthcare work in the United States? That's something that you might get some resistance from somebody who just wants to do RNA-seq analysis. And we say, sorry, you need to understand how healthcare works in the United States. And by the way, we apologize for what you're about to learn. And the hierarchy of evidence used in clinical medicine, and then healthcare databases, the different utilization databases where you can potentially do discovery, ontologies and terminologies, coded data, clinical text, HIPAA, electronic phenotyping, and then different types of analyses from purely statistical association to causal models. I must say that you can already see overlap in these areas. We don't think that's a bad thing. In fact, we think that that suggests to them that this is an integrated field, since the issues of patient privacy, the issues of ontologies occur throughout all of these elements. In imaging, of course, is the basics of acquisition and analysis. We expect them to know about the machine learning, the great advances, especially for imaging with deep learning, radiology workflows, NLP, databases, regulatory issues, and a couple of sample applications that are the archetypes in imaging informatics. And then we have this kind of outlier one, which we debated having, but this is basic skills. So some people said should not be part of a qualifying exam, but we had examples of students who, because of the nature of their research, never had to actually grab a big data set and do anything with it. They were just doing different types of also meritorious work, but we didn't want them to leave our PhD program not knowing about this stuff. So this is not rocket science, but we wanted them to know about the different ways to represent data in 2018. We still want them to understand relational databases, although that may go away sometime. Data wrangling, what does that mean, and how much time does it take, and how expensive is it, and what are the trade-offs? Basic data analysis in like R or one of your favorite Python package, and then basic visualization and plotting. So I wouldn't say a very high bar, but we wanted to make sure everybody could do this. Oh, so I apologize for this. This is just to remind me, this is the first quals bioinformatics question. So the idea is to, and this, many of you are educators, you know this. The first questions are real basic confidence builders so that their adrenaline levels can come down. So I give them a pairwise alignment, and I say, here's an alignment, what do the letters stand for? Okay? Remember, some of these people are in imaging, so that was a victory to learn what an amino acid was. What does the equal sign mean? What does the gap mean? And so that's question one, is real basic kind of mapping, not mapping, that's a magic word I learned today. Basic stuff. And then we say, what are the key inputs for algorithms that do this? What is the computational complexity? You can see we're getting another level of insight required. What assumptions do we make about the input sequences? What is the gold standard for a sequence alignment of two protein sequences? And then getting even more sophisticated, you might argue, what are the general options or approaches to alignment if you have databases that are billions of bases? So this gets them into heuristic, non-optimal algorithms like BLAST and others, BLAT. And then finally, and then again, you don't have to read this, but then we start going into these integrative questions. So question number 4 is actually a letter. Hi, BMIer. This is a consult. I just sequenced this protein. It's the key to Altman's disease, a terrible chronic condition. I'm a new faculty. I don't have a lot of experimental funds, but I need to do an analysis and then write an email in return to them that explains what their options are, what's going to be expensive, what are the solved problems that they can do off the shelf, but what are the kinds of questions they might ask that are going to be research questions, and if it's mission critical for them, then they're looking at solving an unsolved problem in informatics. And so we try to do that. And that's just one example, and I don't think we're particularly good at it yet, but we just had a couple of rounds of this. So I want to now tell you how we grade these and then talk about it. So each exam has 6 questions from each of those 6 areas, but when I say each of those 6 areas, that's really the part 1 and part 2 that's very area specific. By question 4 or 5, at the bottom of the question, it starts being integrative and it's expecting you to know things from the other areas. That's the art that we're trying to get that we don't quite have right, but we're getting there. We grade them anonymously, which I think is quite important. We meet and we evaluate, so then when we grade them on this scale. Outstanding displays special insight and unusual creativity or depth. That's our super easy to evaluate criteria 1, down to poor, unacceptable area with major gaps, errors, or misunderstanding of concepts. And so we don't want to freak out, but we give a number between 1 and 5. It's in a spreadsheet. Then we have a meeting and we look across for student A. We say, oh look, it's a bunch of 1s and 2s and 3s. We're happy with that. Good, relatively complete answer. That's 3. If we see 4s or 5s, then we get concerned. And the outcomes can be pass, you did fine. Retake the entire exam because there are too many 4s and 5s, 3s, 4s, and 5s maybe. Or retake a maximum of 2 sections. So if you get a 4 or a 5 on just 2 areas, we might say, okay, we're going to give you credit for the other 4. We just want you to retake those 2. But if it's 3, you can't do 3 retakes. It has to be the entire exam again. So we have administered an examination based on this curriculum twice, each over 2 days. We got feedback that we shouldn't make it 24 hours, so now it's 2 working days so that people can go to sleep. The first time we offered it, it was 24 hours and nobody went to sleep. We didn't think of that. On the first exam in January, we had 4 full passes and 3 people who had to take 1 area over again. So we felt that that was a success. We just completed the June exam. I just looked at them last night. 4 complete exams, and the 3 who had to retake did their retake. We were very happy with the quality and granularity of the answers. They were at a level of depth and sophistication that we thought was exactly what was missing previously. I would say that the faculty were happier than the students. The students had a lot of suggestions about feedback. Some of it was totally reasonable, like don't have 24 hours, so have 2 8-hour periods separated by some sleep. And they didn't fully understand those questions at the bottom that weren't within the curriculum. And so we have to do better messaging that we want them to be able to integrate across these. So we want them to understand radiogenomics, about how you're combining radiology data with genomic data. That's something they should be able to think about even if they've never worked in that area because of their basic knowledge. So it's a work in progress. I think you get that idea. So I'm going to end maybe a little early, but that's fine for questions, and it's the end of the day. Faculty were unhappy with the breadth of the PhD and research master students going in, despite continued really success in their depth. So the depth was not the problem. Years 3, 4, and 5 went well. We just weren't happy with the outcomes at year 2. we created this draft curriculum. I call it Stanford curriculum not so much for branding, but to show you that we are humble, that we're not sure this is the right curriculum for the whole world. We're pretty sure it's the right curriculum for our program, and that's why we're using the word Stanford, not because we're trying to. And it clearly reflects our local interests and priorities, and there's clearly gaps that probably you have already seen and are going to suggest to me in the next 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm looking forward to hearing them. This is the first public disclosure of this, other than giving it to the students who are allowed to send it to their friends. We use this curriculum as a basis for this written comprehensive exam. This is the first public discussion, and we're thinking that this might be useful to open source, but I'm very sensitive to all of the issues there. So I look forward to, I don't know how to do it, and I'm not sure it's even a useful thing. So I'm very interested in finding out your thoughts about that. But what we do know is that we have to improve and harmonize the existing elements. I think this is going to happen for free because I think the students are going to fix it up so it becomes a better study manual for future generations of students. So I think we might get that for free. The students are very clever, they're hardworking, they take this seriously, and so I think if we put this on Google Docs, they'll just fix it up. And then I think we probably do have some gaps that even we think should be there once you remind me that they should be there, and they're not. So thanks for your attention, and I look forward to a discussion.
Okay, actually,
Or not.
no. Actually, you had much more time. I mean, you had 40 minutes, not 20.
I know.
So we had
Oh, I'm sure there's ample discussion going to happen. Don't worry. We'll fill up the other.
Oh my God, there's 3 people on.
Yeah. No. Okay. So
seat.
no. I think that was really quite fascinating, Russ. So the students struggled on the exam with the more integrative questions. So my question to you is, how much within the first and second year do you incorporate that problem-based learning aspect in their coursework,
So it's a
such
great
that
question.
they learn that?
So let me be clear. They didn't struggle with the answers. They were surprised to see it on the exam and wondered if it was out of bounds. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing is the training we do in the integrative stuff is very much, we have a journal club during the year and in the summer where the faculty try to model, and I ask the senior students to model critical evaluation of a paper or of the work that's being presented, where the questions are, what are they doing, why did they do it this way, and is this how I would have done it? So that's one of the major ways of these very kind of important weekly meetings where we try to model critical evaluation of the literature. We also do this in the class, the project class that I mentioned, where it's teams of 3 or 4, and they not only do their own project, but they peer review the other projects, and so that gets them thinking about how would I do this other stuff, and how does a team work. So I think it's an area we could improve, but we did have explicit parts of our broader curriculum aimed at that synthetic work.
Okay. Thank you.
So, a couple of questions. First of all, great talk, and I'm the incoming director of graduate education of Bioinformatics program in our university. So,
Congratulations.
no, not really. So I think, I'm pretty excited. A lot of good ideas here that could be adapted. So one question is, we're dealing with students when you have all these 6 key areas. Some of them come in with 1 or 2 of them, core. So. And some come with nothing, and some come with quite a bit. Do you find issues in dealing with an incoming class with such a heterogeneous population? Because you really have big breadth here, and even if in programs that don't have such a big breadth, they're still incredibly interdisciplinary.
Yeah, no matter what the program, you're going to have that. It's very fractal, so that's going to happen no matter what your scope is. So I didn't talk about this, but in our coursework section, we make an allowance for courses that are not at a graduate level, but clearly a student needs in order to succeed in the program. And you can take a certain number of units of non-graduate courses. So these are basically advanced undergraduate courses in statistics or biology or programming to try to get you up to speed in that area. So we've tried to make a specific allocation of units for addressing areas that you don't feel like you're comfortable with. That's the first thing. The second thing is, other than that, we want everybody to start from scratch and get to this point, regardless of their background. A very important feature of this is the group study, which we were hoping would happen, and it has happened. And then they come together and they start telling each other, I know a lot about bioinformatics. Let me explain to you why Russ put this in the curriculum and what it means. And then there's other people doing similar things. And this leads to, obviously, a million other benefits for intra-class communication and networking and harmony. And it's not an explicit part of the program, but we all recognize it as a very important part of the program. So, and then we don't accept people who we think are too far from getting to here. So that's another thing you have to do during admissions, is saying, okay, we know what our expectations are. Given this person's substrate, are they going to be able to get to this point, or do we have to recommend to them, you need to go do something else for a little while before you're ready for this? And that's a hard decision, but it's one that we have to make at admissions. Does that, you're making faces like I'm missing the point.
No, you're not missing the point. I'm making faces because, I don't know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. No, you totally answered and more, so thank you very much. I think I was just looking behind me, seeing there's a line, so I'll reserve my other questions for later.
Go right to the back.
Hey, Russ, that was great. So at Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, we also have a PhD exam specifically for the computational biology students inside computer science, but every area in computer science has their own PhD exam, okay? So what we have done is somewhat similar to the part that you're doing that is about the R01. What we have is the students do a research paper, and they have to write it 100% by themselves. So it's almost like we completely skip the first thing you do, which is the questions that they have to answer, and we only have the second part.
So how do you address this? Or
so we address the general bioinformatics background with courses that they have to take, with required classes that they have to take, and then covering skills that. So we're doing that through coursework,
yes.
And we're just emphasizing research and writing skills. So I was wondering, I had two questions for you, or three questions. One is, do you think that you could have achieved what you're doing through classwork requirements or not? That's one question. Second question is, to what extent are you emphasizing research and writing in the R01 thing? Okay. The third question is.
Please keep track of these.
Well, I've already forgotten my third question. So.
Okay. Good. So two. So the first one is, have we considered coursework for the breadth? And the answer was I think it's very interesting. Maybe you'll agree. Where's the class summary? In fact, we used to require all classes in all 6 of those areas, and the students came to us and said, we came here for graduate school to become deep experts, and you're killing us with 6 introductory courses that do overkill on the T. So please only require 2. Let us be smart and learn the other basics if you will just give us a list of what to learn. And that will allow us to be very deep in CS and stats, because that's where we compete in the marketplace. So that kind of experiment was done, and the students resoundingly didn't like it.
Okay, so I did have I do remember the other question. So one is, to what extent are you actually emphasizing requiring that they get skilled in programming?
Right.
Okay, and the other question is, where are you expecting some of these students to end up? I mean, as PhD students, are they going into academia? Are they going into industry? And how does it influence the rest of what you're doing?
Good. So that's 4 questions. You can't leave, because you're going to have to remind me of the questions. So the second one was about the extent to which we focus on writing and communication skills, and that's what happens in the project class, the second bullet that I teach. It's not only how to write, it's several lectures on how to write abstracts and how to write an R01, and I'm kind of passionate about writing, so it's a lot of writing and oral communication, and that's part of that class. I love this class because I have them as captives. It's required. Everyone in the program has to do what I say at least once in this class, and so I really try to drive home scientific communication as part of that. And then, okay, that was question number 2. Question number 4 was, where do they end up? And it is a mix of academic positions and industry with a focus on startups because of where we are in Silicon Valley. So I can't tell you the last time one of our graduates went to a big pharma, which is just shocking to me. Maybe we had one go to Genentech 5-6 years ago, but other than that, they're all saying we're gonna roll our own, basically. So that was question 4. What was question 3? Programming. So we have we used to require assembly. When I was a student in the program, we required assembly language because we wanted you to really know how a computer works. That went, by the way, towards, well, you have to know like C or Fortran or Pascal, for those of you who are old like me. And now it's one of the, and then now we're stressed out by this because now you can get very far with like R and MATLAB. And the faculty wants everybody to be able to program, and we have evidence, however, that some students who are doing excellent PhDs have never done anything deeper than R scripting. And we don't know what to do about that. The old fogies think we should go back to assembly language, and everybody else says, let's deal with it. I would be very interested in people's thoughts about this. The one place is that there's a required class in data structures and algorithms that requires some programming, so that helps. And my class, if you take it, is done all in Python, and you must know Python or you will not pass my class. But that's a little funky. Ido, is there a follow-up on this issue?
Yeah, about the one thing I see missing here is, speaking of Python and programming, how much machine learning skills are
Tons.
required? Okay,
So I'm speechless because the question is getting them to take classes other than machine learning, not getting them to take. So they all, I wouldn't say they have dollar signs in their eyes, but they're watching the market. And if you know how to spell the words deep learning, you know, you're starting out at $220,000 a year or something crazy. So there's no, and we're very lucky at Stanford to have a plethora of offerings in machine learning, both from the statistics department and the computer science department. I think English will be teaching one soon. And so the problem is not exposure to machine learning. In fact, as a director thinking about the next 30 years, one of my concerns is make sure they learn a little bit about discrete algorithms and things other than associative methods, because maybe those will be useful too.
Hi, Russ.
Hi.
We are running in Israel for 10 years, I think right now, 9 years, a program for physicians who are actually practicing physicians that are ready to come for a day once, for a full year. And they take 6 courses, and those courses are actually, except ones that I'll ask you the second question, are quite similar to your course, your core, your 6 core issues. Did you try it? I mean, to teach it to practicing physicians with not a lot of, engineering and science background?
So thank you for asking that. So among those 211 graduates are many MDs. So especially in our master's program, we try to have MDs in every class. It's a special MD, one who often was an undergraduate major in engineering or computer science, who's not afraid of learning this. But they are out there, and they can be highly impactful graduates, because then they go into medical situations where they can be either translators, or they can just be the champion within a healthcare system or a healthcare company for what the power of informatics is. So yes, I would not say every physician can do this,
right.
But I can give you a list of 50 or 60, including myself, who've gone through this program successfully. It's very entertaining, just as a so if you go to medical school and then you complete your residency, so first you're an undergraduate. Let's say you're an undergraduate in computer science. Then you go to 4 years of medical school, 3 or 4 years of residency. Now you apply to our program. You were a computer science undergraduate, so you have confidence that you can do this and that you know the biology and the medicine, but you haven't done a problem set in 8 years. That is a very entertaining situation to observe, because these are very confident, very distinguished students who are faced with a bunch of Stanford undergraduates who just want to get a job at Google, working all day, all night, and then they're coming in, and they succeed, but it is almost invariably a stressful and if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger type experience.
We actually try to do it in a very friendly environment, and most of them are very happy. This is elective, right?
Right, so they're doing it because they want to be, and our guys want to be there too, but because we say, I'm sorry, you have to take data structure and algorithms with all the Stanford undergraduates, all of whom want to work at Twitter, Facebook, and Google, then it's just a level of kind of competition to get a B they're not used to.
One specific issue that I want to ask you about is that we don't have is imaging.
Yes.
Because we realize that this takes a lot of mathematics and calculus behind it, or something like that, and all of the others are somehow linked together, and they can feed to each other. And once you get all of the others, they are, as you mentioned, are overlapping,
Yes.
even in the skills. But we were afraid to put in imaging because we realized that this will take a lot for practicing physicians that never had something like that. This will take more than all of the others combined.
That is a very fair point. I think there's no doubt that this is an outlier. If you did a T-SNE of all these areas, imaging would be a little bit far out. I said it's a function of our local interests and expertise. We have Daniel Rubin is a very active member of our executive committee. He teaches a great course, and so for us it's an easy decision to keep it in. But you could imagine without Daniel or without the local interests at Stanford, it might fall by the wayside.
And you can see that students have more difficulties with this, or they somehow
No,
observe?
because the math and quantitative level of the students is pretty high. And in fact, because of the deep learning revolution, it's turned out to be brilliant because they learn about deep learning on images, and then they say, okay, how would I apply this to DNA, which is a tricky transformation, as many of you know. So it turns out right at this moment to have been brilliant, even though we didn't plan it that way.
Good, thank you.
So to begin, your presentation reminded me a lot of, let's see if I can get his name right, K. Anton Feenstra's presentation. I mean, he even had the T also on there with the breadth versus depth, except he flipped upside down and he had
Could you send that to me, please?
I'm not like associated with him,
Okay.
but I can,
Okay.
maybe we could.
Oh, there you go. Hi.
Oh,
I don't think, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
steal any ideas or not reference ideas. And I
Right.
apologize if I did.
I think we both stole the tea somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I made the tea this morning, but the tea has been around in the jargon for a while.
People too, right?
Yeah. Yikes.
though to be fair, he did add some pretty cool suspension bridges between the pillars of the T.
I'm
so that's
sorry
nice.
I missed your presentation.
Yeah. Anyway, so what do you think is really, because it seems like in a lot of different fields, right? For, say, physics, you don't kind of, it doesn't seem like you get this kind of breadth, and you may get the depth, but you may not get the depth. Or
Yes.
all right. But what do you think is really special about this field in particular, bioinformatics, that really requires you to get both a huge breadth of information and depth in different subject matters?
It's a great question. So you're right. In physics, the T is a much narrower T. It's like F equals MA. That's your general knowledge. And then it's whatever you do is your specific. So I've thought about this a lot, and I don't know if I have a great answer, but I think biological and medical data is extremely funky. It's not to say that there are not other data types that are also similarly complex, but it definitely is complex and kind of, I've used this word fractal. And so I think that one of the things we want to stress in our training is dealing with these data sets that for many other data scientists would be frustrating to the point of saying, why are you even asking me to do anything? The data that they're used to working with is often much more complete, much more predictable in formats to start with that are much more manageable. So I think the nature of biomedical data, and I know this is a fuzzy thing to say, but I think it's very hard. I have a few students who have left biology and gone to like LinkedIn, and they come back and say, the research we do at LinkedIn is a lot like what I did in biology, but we have much better data than you have in biology. That's just what they say. So that's the one thing. The other thing is because there's implications for human health for some of the work, not all of the work. There's a need to understand this crazy thing that I was talking about with the healthcare system, where you would say, you would never say to a physicist, you need to understand, how the Department of Energy is organized in order to become a successful physicist. But in many cases, you really can say to our students, if the kinds of tools you're building have any chance of making the kinds of impact you're advertising in the first couple of slides of your talk, you really are going to have to understand those systems. So that connection to the application goals is I think, important enough for us to require this depth. So those are my two main answers, the funkiness of the data and the fact that at least part of the work, and I don't want to, the reason I say part is because I understand that there's very important informatics that's applied to environmental sciences and plant, which might not be directly for human health. But for the part that's human health, you really do need to have a broader view because it's all about integrating multiple sources of data in making decisions about patient diagnostics, prognostics, or therapeutics.
Thank you.
Hopefully that's reasonable.
Hello. So I just graduated last year.
Congratulations.
I went to industry and I went to the program in Pittsburgh. Actually, Russell's sitting right here, who was the director. I find that so the first 2 years is a lot of coursework, but at the same time we are required to do like serious research.
Yes.
So what is the feedback from your students when they have to do both at the same time and have to pass this very
Stressful.
extensive exam?
Yes. I tell the students that the qualifying exam is by far the most stressful thing. We all know this because everybody in the room knows more than you. Whereas at your defense, you're pretty sure you know more than everybody in the room. So it's a nice switch over those next years. To be honest, they all took 6 or 8 weeks off from research to study for this. And we're keeping track of that. And I actually sent their mentors a message that we have this qualifying exam, it's super stressful, and it's possible that your student will be absent as they prepare for it. You can't just pass it based on those 2 months. You have to be paying attention for the first 2 years. But the sense is that they did need to get together, organize their study groups, and really do it deep. It's similar to what the medical students do before the boards, where they just take time off and prepare for it. And I think that's, and I don't know if it was 4 weeks or 8 weeks, but it was something like that.
What did the mentors say?
I was afraid, and that's, like I've been around a while, and like the mentors can say anything they want to me, and I won't care.
But they can fire the student.
Right. So they don't. And in fact, the ones who responded, which was about half, said, I totally support this. It will probably make Joan a better researcher in the future, and I wish I knew that stuff as well. So they were quite supportive. On a mentor time scale, 4 to 6 weeks, for some mentors that's like the time in between meetings, so it's not a big deal. Not me. I'm sure nobody in this room. So they were quite supportive, and I think the students come out at the end of the process feeling pretty good about, wow, I know a bunch of stuff, and there's a certain pride that I hope is real and that kind of helps them in their career. Did I answer your question, though?
I think so, yeah. I was just asking about the balancing between this general education and
Yes.
then the research.
Yes. So they're doing it in the ways that I described before. They are doing, just like you did, very serious initial research that will lead to their dissertation. And then this we have to tell them about this on day 1 so they can plan their curriculum, and we do.
Yeah, I think it's a great talk, by the way, and I think it's, so I did computer visions and images in grad school, but I ended up working for Ancestry, so.
Bingo.
That's why you did all of them.
You're my perfect example.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I actually graduated from Stanford a few years ago, so not BMI. I was in CSB.
We love that department as well.
It's a good department. I have 2 questions. The first one is, you mentioned that there's some interaction with the senior students in BMI and the junior students. Since coursework is only 2 years, the first 2 years is my understanding, how does that interaction play out? Is that just at journal clubs, or?
It's a couple of things. It's journal clubs, but the thing that we started doing is at the annual retreat. We have a sleepover retreat, whatever you go away someplace, whatever that's called. I think it's called a retreat. We now have a standard session where the senior students take about an hour and a half and go over all the key classes at Stanford and give like the lowdown about what's great and what's terrible. And that changes over time, so you need to do it every year. First of all, the first year students are all like listening and taking notes, but also this evolves as the teachers change and as this curriculum change. And that is a great, we have our retreat like many departments at the beginning of September. So the students, the first years get there, they hear this great rundown of the classes from the 3rd and 4th and 5th years, and that also makes it easier to approach them and say, hey, how would you learn about blah, blah, blah? And that begins this process of what we call we always worry about horizontal integration of the class so that they feel, and that usually is pretty easy because they all feel we're in this together. But we also want vertical integration of the classes, and this is the first step in trying to make that happen.
Thanks. And my second question was about one of the items that you had on the curriculum. I think there was 4 units listed for social and ethical
Yes.
issues. So I know one unit of that is the NIH requirement for ethics, right? Which, in my humble opinion, was a very boring class at Stanford.
Not always scintillating,
so
but required to get the money, so we do it happily.
Right, yeah. And the students can take it on a Saturday, so that's a fun day. But my question was for the social side, in my experience post-PhD, post-grad school, I've noticed that, I've met a lot more social scientists who kind of are shocked that data scientists or informaticians aren't aware of a lot of these social implications in their work. And so I was just wondering if there's any integration, what that curriculum looks like, those additional 3 units.
Yes.
Are those, do you have BMI students actually taking classes in like a sociology department, or are those BMI specific?
No, they're
courses?
not BMI specific. It's a great question, and let me just agree with you that this could be 10 units and still wouldn't be enough, and especially those of you who've been following the literature on bias in machine learning methods and how in the setting of healthcare that could be very dangerous, so totally agree. This is a broadly construed as usually classes outside of technical areas. It's usually not technical classes in ethics, but it also can be in social stuff like sociology or even business, like how to do I had some students who took a how to write a business plan as part of that requirement, and the end of the story is they won a business plan competition based on that class, and they quit our program to start the company called Ingenuity, which some of you may know. So it's kind of a win for the world. It was a loss for me. But yeah, so this is very broad. In addition to ethics classes and very broadly construed, we also, I forgot to mention, in our Tuesday talks, every quarter we have an ethics day. And this might not be ideal because you probably want it to be infiltrated through all the talks, but where one of the faculty presents a contemporary issue in biomedical informatics relevant ethics. Like, remember there was a killer in California who was identified because his relatives had like 23andMe or Ancestry data, and the police subpoenaed it, and so we had a whole discussion about that because it's where the technology meets. So we, in addition to those units, we have a regularly recurring topic at the journal clubs. Okay. I don't think it's enough, but at least it gets the students aware that this is an issue.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Russ, just a comment. Firstly, I'm really glad you're doing this broad overview because I work at a pharmaceutical company. I'm a computational biologist. I've been there 20 years for those who don't know me. So I've interviewed a lot of people over those last...
Organizer of ISMB 1995. 96 if I'm not mistaken.
Attendee of 94. So what we have seen over time is, the people we interview, they really don't have any basic bioinformatics skills, right? They might be experts, they might have written 4 papers in an area, but you ask them what Smith-Waterman is, and most of them are at loose ends to even know what, they never even heard the name, let alone be able to describe it. So I think it's really important that, and the other thing we have seen is that what we are doing in pharma has changed so much over the last 20 years, right? I started by doing gene finding, and I never look at a gene anymore, right? So things change.
That's your life now.
Yeah, so it goes all over the place. So I think it's really important that all the PhDs we generate, they have a broad background and they have specialty areas that they're able to move into. Because the problem with people who are just specialized in one area, when they come into pharma, is they stick in that area. And they do not move with the changing times, and they do not do well.
Can I make a videotape of you to show the students?
Absolutely.
This is why we did it.
No. I'm thank you for doing this. Right. So I strongly encourage other colleges, universities, make sure that the students who graduate have broad backgrounds because it's really, really important.
Thank you. You're the chair. You get to do whatever you want.
At the beginning, you said that you don't know anything about pedagogy or
theory. Like I learned about Bloom today. Bloom seems like a good idea. I should read about Bloom. Yeah. I'm going to read about Bloom.
Based on your responses to questions, you apply a lot of theory in what you do.
But that's just luck. I'm not sure people should get credit for luck.
It's quite clear that there is not a plan, a pedagogical plan behind this, or at least awareness.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, there are a lot of teaching techniques that you use, like working in groups, peer instruction,
good.
or many things like this. So that's perhaps why it works so well.
And it's also the value of these to make people who are doing this aware of these tools so we don't have to reinvent things. So that's why this workshop is so useful.
Okay, so
Thank you.